In today's video, I want to talk about how conflict tends to escalate and some skills you might be able to use to kind of manage some of that. Conflict is not linear. You know that if you've been around me any period of time, if you've been in the program at all. And yet sometimes for purposes of discussion, kind of linear descriptions of things tend to be helpful. I want you to notice here a particular scale that's been developed and been used multiple ways, and it's kind of the 5 levels of conflict scale. And I think it's helpful as we think about conflict in church, because many times we're in conflict, but we really don't realize it. For example, the lowest level of conflict is the level of problem. I mean, if you and I show up and there's something we need to accomplish, and we have this issue we need to resolve, and we sit down and we have that discussion and we resolve it, we just resolved the problem. You may not know it, but we resolved the conflict. When I was a youth minister in a large church in Texas for a while, we had a ministry of a lot of older people there. I'm not sure how we ever got the idea of calling them 39ers, because we hadn't seen that age in many, many years. But they were a great bunch of people. They had quite a bit of money. They kind of did their own thing. And they went out and they bought a van, a really nice 15-passenger van that had a lift on the side of it. But they were really gracious. They'd bought that with their own money, not out of the church coffers, but they told me as a youth minister if I ever needed it, I could borrow it as long as I signed up for it. So I did. I was taking a bunch of kids to Six Flags over Texas. And you hadn't lived, you're taking 200 kids to Six Flags over Texas in August. But anyway, we got ready for that trip. I'd signed up for that van. The day before the trip, the deacon who works with the seniors comes in and says, "Steve, I'm sorry, this is pinochle night," or whatever it was, and we need the van. Sorry about that. Now, at the problem level, we would have sat down and said, "Hey, I need the van. I signed up for the van. You need the van. What do we do?" And we would have gotten together and maybe pooled some resources and rented a van and gone on, and everybody been happy. But we weren't that mature, of course, and things escalated. It went to level 2, which is issue. Issue says, we got a problem here with this issue. We're going to resolve it. We're going to take care of that, and we want everybody to be okay. And I'm happy with you, having things go your way, but I know for sure things are going to go my way. See the difference? Now we've escalated a little bit. So I'm going to work with you, and we're going to find our way, but by golly, the youth ministry, we signed up for that van, and I followed all the procedures, and now you're pulling this junk on me. And I start thinking, they're kind of that way. Those older people and all that, they think they own the church, and they're telling me what they can and can't do. And Tom, who was their deacon, is thinking, that snot-nosed kid, just because he has 200 kids, thinks he can do anything he wants. We bought that van. We escalated that into an issue, and we still could have resolved it and had a little bit of hard feelings between us, but gone on. But no, we didn't do that either. We escalated conflict. At conflict level, now here's the deal. It ceases to be about the van, right? This is about Tom and I. And what I know for sure is that I'm going to win, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to make sure Tom loses. And Tom's going to win, he's going to make sure I lose. So immediately then, we start getting on the phones, and I start calling the parents of the youth group. Well, you know what? We may have to rent a van. I mean, they said we could use it, then they took it away from us. You know how they are. Can you make a few phone calls? Maybe and then he's over there talking to the elders going, you know what? We bought this van. This snot-nosed kids. And suddenly there's a war between Tom and I. Now, thank goodness ours got resolved at that level, but you could have gone beyond that. Fight or flight. That level says, not only am I going to win, I'm going to run the other person off. I'm going to get my way, and that person's got to go. You've never seen that one at church, have you? And you can either run them off physically, or you could even just partition them emotionally at church, not talk to each other, go out separate doors, all that stuff. And it becomes this ongoing fight where you divide up into separate groups and use all kind of dire language about one another. You brave-heart it, and you're ready to attack one, that kind of thing. It goes beyond that, even up to intractable, which is not only will I beat you, not only will I run you off, I will then hunt you down. All right, I will hunt you down, and I will destroy you. And so you go to your next job, and they get a phone call, and don't hire him. He's dangerous or she's dangerous. Don't do that because they're bad people, right? Now, this is called Thompson's
Thompson's levels of conflict, but Thompson basically says that conflict, if left uninterrupted and escalating, will follow this scale. Now, a few things we need to know about this scale that makes it useful. Number one is actually organizations can still function at these top three levels. May not be ideal, may not be perfect, but churches function and organizations function like this all the time. You can get stuff done if you don't like each other. You get stuff done at church if there's warring parties. It happens all the time. Kingdom business still goes on. Somewhere toward the end, if you hit the next button, it may show where it is. There you go. Right here, right in this arena, it ceases to be possible for the warring parties to sort it out themselves, and they have to get outside help. Unfortunately, like in my job, when churches call me, they're usually up here. They've driven the bus in the ditch, they've turned it upside down, they've set it on fire. Then they call the Institute for Conflict Management. But usually beyond this point right here, you're really not going to get a lot done internally. You got to have outside help. All right? The last concept I want to think about is this. Your job when you're in conflict with somebody is not to make it go away. According to Thompson, what you want to do is lower the tension. Take conflict and take it down to issue. I can't stand them. Then let's talk about what the problem is. She can't be trusted. Let's talk about the problem and work on the problem. Issue is, yeah, we can get this done, but I don't like them. Let's find a way to be productive together. Your job is to lower the tension in the conflict, not just pray and wave a magic wand and hope it goes away. At these levels, you're going to need outside help if you're involved in it to come in to help you manage those entities. Next slide. So why do you want to do this? Why risk getting burned in something like this? A couple things. Most conflicts should not involve the bosses because the intervention of the leader raises the stake of the conflict. So just because somebody's fighting doesn't mean as a leader you need to jump into it. Just because people aren't getting along doesn't mean you need to be involved in it, all right? In fact, if you've got two people fighting over something relatively minor, as a church leader, you get involved in it, what did you just tell everybody? Ooh, that must be important. He or she chose to be involved. And you've now raised the stakes. You need to be very judicious about when you want to be involved in a conflict like that because you're going to raise the level of the stakes. However, certain situations, you do need to intervene because you might be the deciding factor. And this is that kind of worth it scale stuff we talk about. Think about in terms of remember the task relationship model you've been taught before, think in those terms, and also think in the terms of Thompson's 5 levels of intervention. If it's an issue, if it's a problem, and they can work it out themselves, and they can do that, you may not choose to be a part of their triangle. But at some point, if it gets to be a big deal, you may be the only person as a church leader who should be involved. Next slide. But if you do get involved, there's some things you've got to remember, especially at church. Number one, at church, I wouldn't mediate alone very often. If I get involved in a very, very high-level conflict, I tend to have another party with me, whether church or any kind of complex adaptive system. One example would have been for us to work in Knoxville with the environmental intervention most of you are aware of that I was involved in. I always had Phyllis with me because having that other set of eyes and ears who's listening and helping make decisions and passing me notes and helping me decide what's going on was a decided advantage. If you go in and mediate alone, you can do it, but I'd be very careful because people are going to misread what you say. In highly volatile situations at church, they're going to misrepresent you, and having that other party is very helpful. Also, it's dangerous to take sides. When you start thinking pretty quickly, oh, that person's right and that person's wrong, and especially in kind of marital situations, the wife may come in and describe the ogre her husband is, and immediately you pass judgment, and you realize then you've made a mistake. And finally, rushing to intervention. You know what? It's a problem today, it's still a problem tomorrow. Usually, if I was trying to decide whether I need to be involved in a conflict at church, I would give myself one more day to think about it and pray about it, because intervening too early was my problem, whereas for others it was always waiting too long. But for me, rushing to intervention when I was trying to save things was usually an issue. Next slide. So, when do you need to get involved and what's involved in intervention? Number one, first of all, you need to determine whether you ought to be involved or not. Do they need me? This is not my ego, right? It's not my desire to be a Messiah to save things. 2, and then if it's necessary, then I should do it. 2, I should see whether they want to end the fight or not. Sometimes these people fight to have fun. They're going to fight no matter what. Before you get involved, you need to decide, do they really want it resolved, or do they just want to drag somebody into the fight? That's inviting in, all right? 3, negotiate a process agreeable to both parties. You've learned this in your courses, and you're going to pick this up in mediation in your next course. There's a distinct process to mediating conflicts. And we say all the time, trust the process. When you take mediation in the next course, we will give you a specific process to intervene with people and invite them to the table. Stick with that process. Don't abrogate it. 3rd, require a commitment to submit to the process, whatever the results. The problem with churches is it's a volunteer organization. This is a problem I've run into. We get involved in this process. We start mediating the conflict. We start putting it together. And the problem is, what of them doesn't like it? Well, they don't have a boss that'll fire them. They don't lose anything by walking away from the table. And they just quit. I don't want to do that. This is not going my way. And you really don't have any kind of overarching system that holds them accountable, and they just submarine the whole stuff. So one of the things on the front end I always try to do is get them to sign on an agreement, physically sign an agreement that says, what we decide, I will follow. Now, nothing's making them do that except they've signed it. It's shocking how that helps. And finally, bring closure to the reconciliation. Get to the point where people can come together, they can agree we've resolved it, and then with them celebrate that resolution and try to move on. Next slide. Last thing I want you to think about, true peacemakers. If you really want to be a peacemaker in this environment, number 1, you use conflict as an opportunity to demonstrate the power of your conviction. That you believe in peacemaking. 2, you need to know when to overlook an offense. You don't need to be involved in everything. Number 3, you'll change your attitude. You need to work on changing your attitudes and habits that lead to conflict, and the attitudes and habits of church that leads to conflict. Preach about it, teach about it, pray about it, change who we are. Next, know when to assert yourself and know when not to. Understand how to forgive. That forgiveness is not about you, it's about being like God and not holding grudges. Know when to ask others to help make peace, know when it's beyond your ability to do so. And finally, learn how to deal with unreasonable people. We'll have a whole discussion about that. But there are well-intentioned dragons, people who mean well but don't know how to help. 2, there are mean people in this world. And when your mama told you if you're nice to people and they're nice back, your mama lied, because what she should have said, you be nice to people and some people are nice back. There are mean people and some of them go to church. They're manipulative people and some of them will use you. And 3rd, sometimes they're just people who are, crazy. There are some people who have all kind of emotional things going on, all kind of mental instabilities that make them difficult to deal with. You need to learn some skills to manage those people. If you remember Axelrod from our introductory classes and perhaps a negotiation, we'll refer to that later in this course. In other words, there are opportunities to manage conflict. Conflict grows in kind of a logical way, and there's ways for you to intervene to lower those levels of conflict as a leader. Thank you.